All right, so question number 1 on the division review. First of all, it says you have what? Yards of ribbon divided by yards of ribbon. And so I'm going to, first of all, I want to know how many of these I can make, or how many of this goes into that. So that's division. So I'm going to take my amount that I have divided by what I want. And again, scale by 10, scale by 10. And I really don't care where the decimal goes here. I want to have 3 groups. That's easier to think about. So 3 goes into 1, doesn't. 3 goes into 12, 4. Subtract your 12. And again, make sure you write it above the correct place value. Bring down your 6. 3 goes into 6 twice. And I end up getting 0 left over. So my answer is actually 42 crafts that I can make. All right, so let's think about a visual model. This is measurement. These match. So you could kind of think about, drawing a picture of the first, right? And then trying to figure out what goes in there. And so I might go ahead, and I'm trying to think how I want to do this. I could also do this more like scaffolding and just keep drawing pictures of 0.3 to build up. So why don't you pause, see what makes sense to you, and then I might do a couple visual models and you can see which one resonates with you. So think about what kind of visual model do you want to do, and then I can draw a couple to help you out. Okay, so this method is kind of more like scaffolding, where you would just keep doing 0.3 over and over again, like subtracting 0.3, 0.3, 0.3. And what I did is I did a visual model of like 0.3, 0.3, 0.3, 10 times. And that is going to use up, if you take 10 times 0.3, this is going to use up 3 yards. So then I have enough to do 10 again, which would use up another 3 yards, do 10 again, which would use up another 3 yards, do 10 again, which would use up another 10 yards. So far I've used up 12 yards. And that's 40 sets, because 10, 10, 10, 10, that's 40. And I've used up 12 yards, which means I have 0.6 left, which I can do that twice, right? So that's 2 sets, and that uses up 0.6 yards. And so then I have 42 crafts that I can make. Okay, that's one option. And you could do that on a number line too, but again, might be kind of hard. The other thing I did is I drew a rectangle, and I have 12, so 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 12. And then I cut it into 6, or tenths to get like my 6 tenths. And then I went ahead and made my lines go down, so that all of these are cut into tenths. So each one of these rectangles stands for 1, but I cut it into 10 little pieces. So each one of those is a tenth. So what you could do on that is you could circle them, right? So it's like, okay, this is 1 craft, 2 crafts, 3 crafts, and I have 1 left over. This is 1 craft, 2 craft, 3 crafts, 1 left over, 1 craft, 2 crafts, 3 crafts. And then these 0.3s would make a craft over here. So then I could keep going. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then 10. I'm circling 3 tenths at a time, because that's what it takes to make a craft. And then here I have 1 left over, 1 left over, 1 left over, because 0.9, 0.9, 0.9, these 3 would make another craft. And then 1, 2, 3, these 3 left over would make another craft. 1, 2, 3, and then these 3 would make another craft. And so that would end up also being 42 crafts. So you can kind of see it that way as well. So again, those are some visual models. All right, go ahead and work on 2 and 3, and I'm going to pause and then we'll come back together. All right, so let's look at this first one, okay? And I gave you a whole number here. So what you're going to do is you're like, oh, well, I could go in there 10 times, which is fine. You'd subtract 30, and you get 4.2. And then again, most kids would do 1. So what is that, 1.2? Okay, now at this point, you're going to be, it kind of depends on what the kid knows. Like, they might try 0.5 and be like, ooh, that's $1.50, I can't do that. But again, most likely a kid is going to go with 0.1. They're not going to go directly with 0.4 or anything like that. They're going to do 0.1. And that's because they know that 0.1 moves the decimal on 3 to 0.3. So they're going to probably do that. And again, young group may just do it in their head, 0.9. Now at this point, they might do 0.3 because they know that 3 of these would make 0.9, okay? Or they might do this again, you know, hard to know. All right, so 0.3 would subtract 0.9 and you'd have 0 left. Okay, so then over here, what do I get? I get 11.4. And again, if it helps you, you could say, well, times 10 would give me 30, right? Times 1 is going to subtract 3. 0.1 would subtract 0.3. And then, you know, you could double that. 0.2 would subtract 0.6. 0.3 would subtract 0.9. Oops, I don't know why I wrote that. And then 0.4 would subtract, what is that, 1.2. But again, I doubt kids would do that, okay? Unless maybe they made this chart, then maybe they would. All right, let's look at the next one. All right, so again, if I multiply by 10, right, so, you know, 10 times that isn't going to do much. What's 100 going to do? If I multiply this by 100, I'm going to subtract 4, right? So a kid might do that first. They might be like, okay, I'm going to multiply by 100. I'll just subtract the 4. And at this point, they might be like, wow, okay, I mean, I could subtract 4 again. But 5 of those would be 20. So they might use 500 over here. So 500 would subtract 20. And then now we get into 88 cents. Okay, so let's see. We did 100. Okay, what about 10? 10 is going to be 0.4. Okay, because again, if 100 is 4, multiplying by 10 would just move the decimal once. So, and again, a kid might do 10, but they might do 20 because, again, that's just doubling. And remember, doubling is kind of primitive knowledge. So they might do 20, and that would subtract 0.8. And again, same reason over here. At this point, they might be like, okay, well, you know, one of them is 0.04, right? And so double that, they might do double again. But they might not. They might do it twice. Hard to know what a kiddo is going to do. Right there. Okay, so when you add these all up, what is that? 600, 622. And we don't have a decimal in that answer. I mean, well, obviously at the end, but we don't see it visible because if you have $24.88 and you divide it by 4 pennies, I mean, 4 pennies is going to go in there a lot. So it makes sense that this answer gets bigger because, you know, you have a, you know, kind of a decent amount of money and you're dividing by 4 pennies. It should go in there lots of times, okay? All right, try number 4, and then we'll pop back and do number 4 together. So see how this goes. Okay, so if you write it as a ratio and scale it, it doesn't really matter what's on top or what is on bottom. So I'm just going to write 2/3 of a recipe. I might change it later. Calls for 3.5 cups of flour. And I want to get to a full recipe. So I want to get to 1 recipe. So I actually want my 1 on top. Now, usually if you're going to do long division or division, you want the 1 on bottom because you want miles per 1 hour, miles per 1 gallon, dollars per 1 hour of work. So usually when you do rates, the 1s are on the bottom, right? But if you scale, you can see it, so it doesn't really matter. I want to get to 1 recipe, and the reciprocal is what, when you multiply by the reciprocal, you get 1. So this is going to give me 1 full recipe, so that means I have to take this guy times 3 halves as well. So again, to multiply fractions, we're going to make this improper. So 3 times 2 is 6 7/2 times 3 halves gives me 21/4, and 4 goes in there, what? 5 times is 20 with what? 1/4 left over. So I would need that many cups of flour, okay? Now, if you're going to write this as division, you do have to flip this. This is really 3.5, let me rewrite this. If it's a rate, this is really 3.5 cups of flour divided by 2/3 of a recipe. Because we want to get per 1 recipe, and whatever's per 1 in a rate is always on bottom. All right, so it says solve using a scale, and I'm going to use a double number line, paint on a wall, or whatever. So this is 3.5 cups divided by 2/3 of a recipe. All right, and so if you're doing the paint on the wall, this is going to be your picture, right? And then you're going to figure out the paint per strip, total up all your strips, okay? I'm going to do a double number line on this. So, and again, I don't really care if you draw the double number line, but so we have what? We have 2/3 of a recipe is 3.5 cups of flour. So your goal is to scale this to 1. So what that means is you got to focus on the unit fraction on this guy. This is 2 sets of 1/3 or 2 iterations of 1/3. So I need to get to that unit fraction of 1/3. And I'm going to leave this later. So then I get 1/3, 2/3, so then I measure over here and I get 3/3, which is a whole recipe, right? This is one recipe. So I did the math to the bottom. The top just kind of gets the math done to it, and we have to figure it out. So what math did I do to it? Well, I took 3.5 and I cut it into 2 pieces. So I know that I have to take 3.5 divided by 2. So what is that? 6, 7 halves. Divided by 2 is the same as multiplying by the reciprocal. So the fractions up here, these are worth units of 7/4. And we can check it. This should be, what, 14/4. Does that work out? 4 goes in there, 3. Yeah, that's 3.5. So I know I'm right. 7/4, 14/4. So then this guy is going to be 21/4. And again, if I regroup that, I'm going to get my 5 1/4 cups. Okay, I'm going to pause. I'm going to do the paint on a wall quick. I'm just going to get it set up, and then I will go through that with you too in case you like that better. Okay, if you kind of like the paint on the wall better for a rate, again, the thing you want to equal 1 is the second thing. I want to get 1 recipe. So I drew the picture of 2/3. Now, instead of a wall, that stands for 1 whole recipe. And instead of gallons of paint, this is the cups. So I labeled it. Now I got to figure out my paint per strip. So again, 3 times 2 is 6, 7 halves. I have 2 strips, so I get that 7/4. So this is 7/4, 7/4, which means they're all 7/4, okay? So that's kind of getting the value of your unit fraction. And then you're going to total up the strips. So I have 7/4 as a value, and I have 3 strips. I get my 21/4, okay? Which again is the same answer we got before. 4 goes in there, what? 5 times 5 1/4 cup. And notice what the paint per strip does is it gives you the value of your top numbers for your double number line. So when you figure out the paint per strip, that's the same as figuring out the value of the top tick marks on your double number line. Okay, it does the same thing. Okay, so either one, or if you struggle with the double number line, this maybe could help you because it kind of gives you those values. All right, go ahead and try the next problem and I will come right back. All right, sorry about that. There might have been a glitch. I don't know, I drew 3.5. I'm like, and I was thinking these were the same numbers as last time. They're not. So if there's a little glitch, it's because I caught myself and I'm like, oh yeah, they're not the same numbers. So anyway, so I went ahead and redrew this. So I drew my 2.5, draw the first picture, and I'm going to cut it into the halves so you can see, you should be able to see the 5 halves, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. And then I'm going to really get a common denominator. I mean, I have cups with cups, but these are half cups. These are 4th cups. Those are not the same. So scale by both by 2. So I get 10/4 cups divided by 3/4 cups. And again, when you cut it, to get 2 segments, you need 1 cut. So I'm going to cut it this way. And so you should be able to see the 10, right? There's 4, 8, 9, 10. And that's how I caught my error. I'm like, there wasn't 10 because I had 3.5. All right, so that's a good way to check. Okay, so now, let's see, I did that. Step 1, cancel the common denominators. Because what I'm doing is I have 10 1/4 cups, and I'm dividing by 3 1/4 cups. So instead, I'm focusing on that it takes 3, basically I'm going to say 3 to make a group, 3 scoops to make a group. I don't care that they're 1/4 a cup. I'm focusing that it takes 3 of them to make a group. And so then what you're going to do is you're going to circle on pick and get the answer. So my new unit is it takes 3 of these scoops, I don't care what size they are really, to make a group. So it takes 3 scoops to make a group. So this is only going to be 1/3 of a group or 1/3 of a batch, okay? So I know my answer is that I can make 1, 2, 3 batches and 1/3 of the next one. Okay, now again, if you like to label these really are 1/4 cups. So you could label them if you want. I got to watch my time here. But then you got to be a little careful because 3/4 makes a batch. So here's 1 batch. You can see the 3 1/4 make a batch, 3 1/4 make a batch. Now you have 1/4 of a batch or 1/4 left. But again, remember our answer is in batches. So that is 1/3 of what you would need to make another batch. So you got to be careful that you don't think this is the answer because it's not. It's the fact that 1 scoop you would need 3 scoops, right, to make a batch, and you really only have one of the 3 scoops that you need.